Hi, everybody. This is Sean Rogers here at Zyxel. Today is our monthly webinar presentation. So this is sort of an introduction to Nebula. Obviously, if you've been selling Zyxel for a while, you've heard of it. You see it listed on our price list, on our products descriptions. So this is just to give you an idea of what it does, what it offers you. As we go through today, please feel free to send in questions using the question and answer box in the Zoom interface. And I will do my best to try to answer those as we go through. So to start with, what is Nebula? Nebula was the first full stack cloud networking solution aimed at the SMB space. So a short version of it is it's cloud management for your networking equipment, specifically Zyxel security appliances, switches, and access points. The most common one in this, the one you're probably most likely to be familiar with is Cisco's Meraki. Aerohive was also one of the early players in this space, but both of those guys were aimed primarily at the enterprise space. So we looked at that and said, hey, this is really nice stuff, and this could benefit the SMB. But at the time, no one was making anything that was affordable or marketed to the SMB space, and that's where we stepped in. So we launched Nebula all the way back in 2016, and we've been constantly improving it ever since. So the components of it are pretty simple here. There's the hardware, which we just talked about. There is a mobile app that you can use. And then the main core part of Nebula is the Nebula Control Center, which is the cloud-hosted management interface for all of these different devices. It is hosted in Amazon AWS. It is available in just about every country in the world out there, and it complies with all of your standard security requirements. So it can be used as part of a PCI solution. It can be used as part of a HIPAA solution. If you're in Europe, it works with GDRP. It's compatible with that. So there's no issues there. So the main idea behind Nebula is to take all of these things that we have to do when we're deploying a new network and to try to simplify them. So there's less that you need to buy, less that you need to configure, less time spent by your employees setting things up and getting things up and running. So one of the cool things here is it just takes a couple minutes to get a new site up and online. At any point, you can log in. Okay, so let me just share. Let's see, we got a question here. So the question is asking, does this work for MSPs? And yes, this is designed specifically for MSPs, and we'll talk more about management and how that works. But the interface has been designed from the ground up with the idea that you will have multiple customers. Those customers may have multiple sites. And making it easy to manage that. And as we get further into the presentation, we'll have some slides showing how some of that looks, and we can talk about it a little bit more in depth. So for the first thing that you can do here is getting the site up and running just takes a few minutes. You simply log into the Nebula interface, nebula.zyxel.com. You can create a new customer or organization, as we call it in Nebula terminology, create a new site and be up and running. Very basic configuration is ready to go by default. We've got some wizards in there to make things easier for you. If you're using our Nebula Pro, we've got the ability to clone existing customers and existing sites to help simplify the setup process. But you can buy an access point, take it out of the box, plug it in, and within less than 5 minutes, have it up, broadcasting two SSIDs, one that's encrypted, one that's open with a captive portal for guests to be able to connect to. So you can start setting up your customers and setting up their devices before you've even settled on the hardware you want. You can just simply start loading in default settings for your access points, for your switches, before the hardware has arrived. Once the hardware has arrived, there is a QR code located on the hardware itself and also located on the outside of the box. You simply scan that QR code using our mobile app and assign it to the customer and site that it's going to be installed at. And that's all you need to do. There is no additional configuration that needs to be done on the device itself. Locally, everything from this point on is going to be handled in the cloud. There are some minor exceptions to that. One is the GS 1350 series switches. Those of them you will need to enable Nebula on them. These are our security switches, and for that reason, we added an extra step. for cloud management. And then also our security gateways have an extra step or two you may need to follow. But switches and access points, all you need to do is scan in the QR code. So the Nebula agent is built into the hardware itself. The Nebula Control Center is hosted in the cloud with AWS. There is nothing else you need to buy or set up. So there's no cloud keys, there's no virtual machines that need to be run, there's no software that needs to be loaded on a laptop or on a server. Okay, so another question here coming in. If we manage routers through the Nebula, can we still log in directly to the routers or Nebula? So no, with all of our products, if you're choosing to manage them in Nebula, you will do all management through Nebula once you've put them into Nebula mode. There is no local configuration. Now, having said that, on the security gateways and I believe some of the other products, we do have the ability for you to log in via a CLI through the Nebula interface for some stuff. But in general, all management would be done directly through the cloud. When the devices are in cloud mode, usually the only thing you can configure directly on the device itself is setting up a static IP and internet access for those networks where you have to have a static IP to get on. In general, our suggestion is to initially set up the device using DHCP, and then convert it to fixed IP in the cloud, and it'll automatically switch over then, and then change the network settings to require the static IP. But if for some reason you absolutely have to use static IP out of the box, you can log in directly into the units and assign that information. So anyway, back to the presentation. So we give you the ability to access all of your customers, all of their sites, anywhere you have internet access and a web browser. The main management of Nebula is done through the web interface. While we do have the mobile app, it is primarily aimed at just keeping an eye on your networks, onboarding new equipment for your customers, and some very basic configuration. This is a full-featured network interface. It is not a super slim down version. So you really need the extra space and the complexity that we can put into a web browser that we can't really put into a mobile app. But anywhere you've got internet access and you've got access to a web browser, you have access to all of your customers, all of their networks, and all of their Nebula managed equipment. So on the Wi-Fi side of things, we make guest access really easy. So the ability to do captive portal is built into the APs themselves. So if you just are deploying some APs to an existing network with Nebula, you don't have to change any settings in a gateway or use a Nebula gateway to be able to do guest access. So we've got captive portal functionality, and we've got a lot of flexibility with how that works. We can have it set up so someone has to agree to a terms of service to get online. We can set it up so people log in with the username and password you provide them. We can have people register their own accounts. We can have people log in with Facebook. So all of those options are available for you. The captive portal itself, we've got some basic customization you can do in the Nebula interface. If you need more customization on that captive portal, we allow you to download the HTML and CSS files, modify them, and then re-upload them into Nebula for Nebula to host it. And if that's not enough for your customization, we can always point it to a web server that you host to host that captive portal page. So a lot of power built in just on the access points themselves. And then we also offer this type of captive portal functionality through our gateways if you're looking to provide it to non-Zyxel Nebula access points, or you're looking to provide captive portal to wired users. Continuing on here, talking a little bit about wireless, Nebula includes our smart mesh functionality. Basically, all of our access points have the ability to operate in a mesh mode where they do not need a physically wired connection. They will automatically search for other Nebula APs that do have it and will create a mesh to be able to get back to a hardwired connection with as few hops as possible. We also have the ability to enable the smart mesh so it automatically turns on if something should happen to the physical connection to an access point. So for instance, you've deployed a bunch of APs, all of them are wired. and then for some reason somebody unplugs the Ethernet cable going to one of those access points, we can configure Nebula to automatically, when it detects that, to switch the AP into the smart mesh mode and be able to mesh back to maintain providing wireless connectivity. We support, of course, WPA2 and WPA3 enterprise security on our access points. And we support all of the fast roaming and assisted roaming standards out there, 802.11r, 802.11k, 802.11v. On the switch side of things in Nebula here, we have our intelligent power over Ethernet. So this is our ability basically to bypass the standard PoE implementation and basically free up additional budget based on the actual demands of the connected devices themselves. The Nebula interface provides user-friendly ACL and VLAN configuration, 802.1x authentication, LoopGuard, DHCP, etc. And then all of our switches virtually stack. So you can configure ports simultaneously across multiple switches at the same time. The question here is mesh only for specific access points? No, mesh works on all of the Nebula compatible access points. So as we mentioned earlier, all configuration is done in the cloud. Configuration changes are done through the cloud. Firmware updates are done through the cloud. At no point do you need to go on site or do you need to physically or directly access any of the devices. So that gets rid of the need of having, a VPN tunnel for remote access, port forwards, things like that. Everything is simply done in the Nebula interface. On the security side of things, one of the nice features with Nebula is we can make VPN, site-to-site VPNs really easy. You simply go in, choose the sites you want to connect together, choose what type of topology you want to use, star topology or hub and spoke, and all of the VPN configurations then done automatically by the Nebula interface. There's nothing additional you need to do. For remote workers, we have the ability using L2TP. We can send out a script that will automatically configure the built-in VPN clients in iOS devices, Mac OS devices, and Windows devices. It's simply a script. You can send them to automatically handle the configuration for that. And then we also offer the ability through an additional license to be able to convert an access point into essentially a cloud managed VPN appliance that you can give to remote users. They simply plug it into their existing router and they're able to get online and connected back to the office. And we'll talk a little bit more about that down the road here. So Nebula itself, like I've talked about earlier, we sort of got a little ahead of ourselves, but it was designed for the idea, knowing that you're going to have multiple customers, they're going to have multiple sites. So we've made it really easy to be able to handle that. So here's an example here. We have chosen a customer. So let's just highlight some of the things here. So up at the top of the page here, we've got two pull down menus. One of them is organization. That would be your customers. And the other one is sites. So you can very quickly jump between customers and sites just by using this pull down menu system. Choose the one you want and it will take you there. So in this case here, we have chosen an organization. And this is the view you see here. You can see we've got Google Maps integration. So you can, if you have multiple sites, you can have those sites represented visually on the map, just to give you, a bird's eye view of where they might be. And then down below, we've got a snapshot view listing out all of the different sites, what their names are, whether they're currently online or experiencing any connectivity issues, how many devices are on them, how many clients are currently connected, et cetera, et cetera. And then once you're ready to configure or view the site, you just click on the site name and it will take you to the site view. So when you go into a site, and you will see again, we still do have our drop-down menus, so we can always jump to a different site or a different customer really quickly. This is the default dashboard. All of these widgets are configurable, so you can add or remove the widgets that you want to be able to see when you first log into one of your customer sites. But in the example here, we've got the ability here showing how many APs are currently online, how many clients are currently connected to those APs, PoE, how much power is being used versus the available budgets that's there, bandwidth currently being utilized at the site, If you've got one of our gateways with an active security subscription, you can see things here like breakdowns on usage by individual client device, but you can also see network utilization by individual applications, as well as security reports on what's going on. So you can see in this chart here, we've broken out here bandwidth utilization by Netflix, Microsoft Live, Amazon, Apple Store, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all customizable. And then from there, you can drill down into the individual class of device or into the configuration settings. So for instance, here's the status screen for the wireless network. We've got a timeline up top showing bandwidth utilization over time. And then down below, we've got a list of all of the wireless clients. And again, the data included here is fully customizable. So you can just have the data that you want to look at. But in this case here, it's showing which devices are currently connected and which ones were connected but currently aren't. It can show us things like which SSID they were connected to, their IP address, their MAC address, what channel they were utilizing, what band they were utilizing, their connected power for those that are on there, what's the signal strength currently of those devices, what level of security is on there, et cetera, et cetera. On the switch side of things, we have a similar view. We've got a nice little chart here showing bandwidth utilization over time. And then up top, we've got a visual representation of our switches that are on the network. In this case, it's just one. And you can quickly see based on the color indications, what speed the connection is of connected devices, or if no device is currently connected, as well as whether or not that device is currently utilizing PoE or not. When it comes to port configuration on the switches, you simply select the ports you want to edit. And then it pulls up this pop-up menu here where you can see you've got most of your most common settings here that you can then go through and quickly configure VLANs, things like that. So Nebula itself is free. Just about everything I've talked about up to this point is included as part of the free version of Nebula. And for those that aren't included, I've specifically mentioned the licenses that you would need. So Nebula is free. It's always free. There is no limitation to the number of customers you can manage in the free version of Nebula. There is no limitation to the number of devices you can manage in the free version of Nebula. The majority of our customers are using this free version of Nebula. I will talk in some slides coming up here, some of the optional licenses that are available, what the differences are that you get with it, but the core functionality of Nebula is free. So when we first started out selling Nebula products, we followed the Cisco Meraki model where devices that were to be managed in the cloud were different than devices that were managed to be, or supposed to be managed the more traditional ways, directly through a command line or Ethernet interface, et cetera. But over time, we realized that that doesn't really work in the SMB space. So instead, we've rolled out Nebula Flex. So almost all Nebula products available for sale today are Nebula Flex devices. So what that means is that these devices have the option to be managed traditionally or be managed in the cloud, your choice. At any point, you can switch back and forth between the different management modes. So this allows you to standardize on certain devices, regardless of whether your customer is going to be, or you're going to be managing them in the cloud for your customer or not. We know there are still customers out there that just say, no, I don't want cloud management for whatever reason. So you don't have to buy different equipment for each. You can just standardize on one set of equipment. Now, one key thing here is the configurations are not the same between standalone and cloud. So when you switch modes, you do have to reconfigure the devices. In the case of Nebula, if you're switching them into cloud mode, it will still remember most of the configuration from the last time. But if you then switch it to standalone mode, you will then have to reconfigure standalone mode from the scratch. So just something to keep in mind. But it also means you can easily move equipment from one customer to another as well. You will also see some products labeled as Nebula Flex Pro. So for most products, Nebula Flex Pro simply means we include bundled with the device a 1-year Pro Pack license. And again, we'll get to what the Pro Pack license is in a little bit down the road. The one key takeaway for this though is where it's a little bit different is our access points. So with our access points, Nebula Flex Pro devices are the devices you would want to buy if you don't want to use cloud management, but you do want to use a local wireless LAN controller, such as the one that's built into most of our security appliances. So Nebula Flex Pro, for most devices, is either standalone mode or cloud mode, and we include a bundled 1-year Pro Pack license. In the case of APs, it's standalone mode, Nebula mode, including that 1-year bundled Pro Pack license, or local hardware controller. So we'll just go through this really quickly. Here are some examples of Nebula Flex. On the AP side of things is basically all of our lower end access points. So that would be our 50 and 90 series, the 100 series, the 1100 series, and the 200 series. So those are all Nebula Flex, standalone or cloud management. On the switch side of things, it's the 1920 V2 series and the 1930 series. Those are Nebula Flex. And on the security gateways, it's basically any of our Nebula device or security appliances that do not come with a bundled license. To go to Nebula Flex Pro, it would be our higher end APs. So these would be the 500, 600, 5000, 6000 series access points. Those are bundled with a 1-year Pro Pack. On the switch side of things, it is the 1350 series, the 2220 series, and the XS 3800. And then on the security appliances, basically any security appliance you buy that has bundled UTM is going to also include 1 year of Pro Pack. And then to confuse things just a little bit, the gold licenses that are available on the ATP series and will be available in the future on the USG Flex series, those also include 1 year of the Pro Pack. And I believe in the case of the ATP series, the only way to get Nebula management is by having an active gold license. So now let's talk a little bit about the licensing here. So again, we've got the free version, which is what most people are using. And then we've had the Pro Pack. So these are the two that we've been offering basically since the product launched. Last year, I believe it was, we launched now the Plus Pack, which is sort of in between the free version and the paid version. It's specifically designed to compete with cloud offerings on the sort of more consumer-oriented products like Netgear's Insight. So those are the 3 levels that we have as far as device licensing goes. Now, the most important thing to keep in mind is at an organization level, every device in the organization needs to have a license in order for that organization to switch over and offer those plus or pro features. So you can't just put the licenses on a couple devices. Every device must have a license, and only then will the organization be upgraded to the plus or pro service level. Now, if at some point you add a new device that doesn't have a license or a license expires, you do get notifications and email letting you know, and you do get a 15-day grace period to purchase and add a license on to maintain that level. If you do not do it, it will then drop back automatically to the free version of Nebula. So now on to some of the differences here. Hold on just a second. So, so all the versions here have our, unlimited device management, unlimited number of devices, unlimited number of customers. All of them give you the access to being able to put sites and stuff with Google Maps integration, et cetera. All versions of Nebula give you our automatic sort of plug and play install where you simply plug them in, they reach out to the cloud, download their configurations, update their firmware. So there's no configuration of the device directly you need to do before installing it on site or while you're installing it. All of them let you update the firmware over the air and provide basic firmware scheduling for when those firmware updates are going to be applied. All versions give you access to our mobile app. Now, one of the first areas where we have some differences here comes into the logs. So this Errol, this would, I believe, answer your question here, or at least part of it, and that is that logs are stored in the Nebula cloud for you automatically. We have, in the free version of Nebula, you get 24 hours worth of logs in the cloud. With Plus Pack, you get access to 7 days worth of logs are stored in the cloud for you. And then on Pro Pack, we store a year's worth of logs in the cloud for you. Now, for all versions, including the free version, we do support syslog. So you can always be exporting your logs automatically to your own syslog server if you don't want to use the cloud managed logging. or you don't want to rely just on the cloud managed logging, or maybe you've got your own software that analyzes logs for you. So if you are using that, we do have syslog support across the board. Also, all of these products do support SNMP for existing network management software that you may already have. Another area where there's differences between the different license is the number of admin accounts you can have per organization. So again, in Nebula terminology, an organization is usually your customer. So you can have 5 admin accounts, and those admin accounts are granular. So you can control, what level they have access to, view only, the ability to configure things. We have a special role just for installers that allows them to add devices onto the network, but not much else, etc. So with the free version, you get 5 admin accounts for each of your organizations that you're managing. In the case of Plus Pack, that upgrades it to 8. And then if you're using Pro Pack, it's an unlimited number of admins you can have. We also have our own cloud-based authentication database. You can use this for 802.1x authentication. Of course, you can also still use your own Radius server. You do have to use our cloud database if you're doing dynamic pre-shared key. That at this time does not work with Radius. It only works with our cloud database entry there. So the free version of Nebula gives you 50 entries per organization into that database. The Plus Pack gets you 100 entries, and then the Pro Pack gets you an unlimited number of entries into that cloud authentication database. When it comes to the core feature sets and configuration of the core features of any of our devices, that's the same across all of them here. If you're doing Mac-based authentication or 802.1x authentication, all versions of Nebula offer that. Captive Portal, doing authentication through Captive Portal. Again, all versions, including the free version, support that. Now, there is something on there that you'll see called Cloud Saving Mode. So that is something that's only on the free version of Nebula. And basically what that does is basically if you do not log into your customer's organization at least once a month, it will stop collecting the logs until you log in again and ask it to start collecting logs again. So now with Plus Pack and Pro Pack, they unlock some additional features here for us that are not available in the free version of Nebula. So the first one there is advanced firmware scheduling. So you can get in and get really granular with when you update the firmwares via scheduling in the Nebula interface. So you can set up different policies and different rules based on the class of device. So update switches at this day and time, update access points at this day and time. You can go in and set individual upgrade rules for individual devices, et cetera. So that requires a Plus or a Pro Pack. Advanced reporting features. So we have the ability to generate reports in the Nebula interface. So you can set these up to automatically be generated and emailed to you or your customers. You can add your own logo information onto them if you are emailing them to your customers. So that requires a Plus or a Pro Pack license to be able to do that. We have an automatic network topology view where we go through and we draw what your network looks like, what devices are connected to which other devices. So that requires a Plus or Pro Pack to get access to that. So we also have the ability to send out email alerts or push alerts via the mobile app, specifically for when devices go offline. So in order to be able to use that, you do need a Plus or a Pro Pack. We have the ability to generate what are called Wi-Fi vouchers. So this is a way, if you're providing some sort of commercial hotspot setup, like you're at a cafe or a hotel, and you want guests to be able to pay or for access for certain lengths of time, that is something that requires a Plus or a Pro Pack license. And then going up from Plus Pack, these are going to be things that are exclusive to the Pro Pack, and these are primarily features aimed more at your MSP type businesses out there. So in addition to just standard logs, with the Pro Pack, we give you an audit change logs. So we can go through there and keep an eye on who's made what configuration changes and when, to give you that much more ability when you're troubleshooting something to, figure out who changed it and why. We have the ability with the Pro Pack to do organization-wide configuration sync, so you can sync settings between different sites under the org, and the ability to clone existing orgs for you when you're setting up a new organization. The ability to back up and restore certain configuration settings is something that requires a ProPack license. The ability to open a support ticket directly with our HQ's support team, that is something that requires a ProPack license. Otherwise, for support with Nebula, you just contact our local support. Advanced Wi-Fi control functionality and artificial intelligence that can automatically modify wireless settings based on what we see going on, that requires a ProPack. Advanced switch features, specifically port-based bandwidth control, the ability to set VLANs automatically based on the first few digits of a device's MAC address, and static routing, that requires a ProPack. We have some additional IPTV features and reporting that requires a ProPack. The ability to use some of the advanced features on the GS1350 series switches requires a ProPack license. And doing something like cloud-based packet capture on the USG Flexes, that requires a ProPack. So I know it's a lot, I know it's kind of boring, but hopefully it gives you an idea that, whether you need the Plus or ProPack, like I said, most of our users are still using the free version. So this is just showing here, this is our wireless interface. If you've enabled the ProPack, it basically tracks over time performance of different client devices and has the ability to make some automatic changes if you give it that permission based on what it's seeing on the network behavior of those clients. If you're deploying IPTV, we generate some reports automatically for you of what's going on. We can also detect things like packet drops and things like that and give you suggestions for what features or what configurations you should change to try to solve those issues. This is our automatic topology view here, where we map out which devices are connected to which other devices. So it's just something to help you out when you're troubleshooting something down the road, trying to figure out, what's connected to what. So that is it for these per device based licenses and the core functionality of Nebula Control Center. We have another license here that's available called the MSP pack or the MSP license. So this is an interesting license, as this is a license you buy and assign to an admin account. So if you assign this license to an admin account, the features we're going to talk about is available across every single one of your customers, regardless of which version of the core Nebula they're using, the base, the Plus, or the Pro. So if you want these features for multiple admin accounts, you will need to buy a license for each admin account you want to have access for it. So the first thing it gives you is this thing here that we call the MSP portal or MSP view. And basically, it's just when you log in, you get a list of all of your organizations here. So all of your customers, and a quick view of whether they're using the free or paid version of Nebula, whether their licenses have recently expired or not, how many sites each of your customers have, and how many devices each one of those customers has. In addition, it unlocks some additional features here for us. Some of the main ones here is MSP branding. You can remove the Zyxel Nebula branding and replace it with your own branding in the Nebula interface. You can also remove the Zyxel support contact information and replace it with your contact information. So if you are providing your customers the ability to log into the Nebula interface, you can hide at least some of the Zyxel stuff and replace it with your own branding for you. And then, because this is aimed at MSPs, where you may have a lot of different, admins, users coming and going into your company, we've added some tools to make it easier to manage those admin accounts and to make it easier and much simpler to be able to add or remove certain admins from different ones of your customers via a Teams function. So that's something that gets you. It gives you the ability to synchronize certain settings across different customers at the same time. And then lastly, and this might be a key one for some of you, if you want those email or push alerts, if you have an MSP license, you can now enable those alerts on all of your customers, regardless of which version of Nebula. So your free version Nebula customers, you would still be able to get those email alerts and push alerts if you have an MSP license assigned. So now let's talk about even more licenses. So these are going to be security licenses. They're not really Nebula licenses. These are just more of your traditional additional features that you can purchase for your security devices, provided you're using a security device here. So if you are using one of our older NSG models, the UTM licenses for that are called the NSS Security Pack. If you are using a USG Flex, it's called the UTM Security Pack. And then if you're using a ATP, it is the Gold license. So again, these are just the UTM services that unlock UTM features on the gateways. If you're not familiar with UTM, it stands for Unified Threat Management, and it unlocks gateway hosted security services. So gateway-based antivirus, gateway-based content filtering, gateway-based intrusion detection and prevention, et cetera. And the exact combination of features just depends on your appliance and the license there. And I did want to talk briefly, we do have a secure Wi-Fi license that works with Nebula. It doesn't require Nebula. Again, it's a license that's for our security gateways, but basically it allows you to take one of our access points and turn it into a VPN appliance. So as you know, if you've got a lot of users working remotely, one of the problems you often run into is, it can be difficult configuring the employee's device to be able to software back home through their home router. If you want to give them a traditional, VPN router, they may not be able to replace their existing home router, and you end up with double NATing, Wi-Fi issues and stuff. So the solution to that here is a secure Wi-Fi. It gives you an access point. The access point in this case is managed with Nebula, and it automatically creates a SSID that creates a VPN tunnel back to your main building. So you just give it to your employee or whoever it's going to be. They simply plug it into their existing router and they're set to go. You give it an SSID, which can be the same SSID that you use in the office. When the employee's device connects to it, all traffic is then routed through a VPN tunnel back to the main office. Now, this SSID requires 802.1x authentication. So it's WPA2 or WPA3 encrypted, and can work with two-factor authentication. So you can require two-factor authentication before allowing traffic over that VPN connection. And then lastly, we've recently rolled out something called Connect and Protect. So this is an interesting license. This is a license that you apply to an access point. And unlike our Pro and Plus licenses, this allows you to unlock features on a specific AP by AP basis. So only those APs that have the license will have these features. And it can be as few or as many APs in that customer as you want to have it. And basically what it's doing is it's unlocking some basic UTM type services using IP reputation filters. So if you, for instance, you've got a customer, you're deploying their wireless network, they want more security, but they're using a router or gateway that was provided by their ISP or provided and managed by a different vendor, or one that doesn't support any sort of UTM functionality. You can roll out UTM functionality light on individual APs. And because it's individual APs, for instance, maybe you don't want to provide this in the warehouse, you just want this extra security for your public areas or for your sales team, et cetera. So it uses IP reputation to try to block sources of spam, internet-based scanners, botnets, phishing sites, proxy sites, et cetera, et cetera. So this license only works with certain models. So the Connect and Protect license is available on the NWA 1123 ACV3, the WAC 500, and the WAC 500H. And then we have a slightly upgraded version called CNP Plus, which in addition to the IP reputation filter, allows you to create bandwidth rules on a per application basis. So that's available on the NWA 110AX, the NWA 210AX, the WAX 510D, the WAX 610D, the WAX 630S, and the WAX 650S. Okay, guys, we're done. You made it through here. So if any of this sounds interesting, at any point you can go to nebula.zyxel.com, log into the Nebula interface. We have a free demo site set up so you can go in and play around with that demo site. And get a feel for it. If you are part of our partner program, so that means you're one of our resellers that has signed up and been approved, you can contact your salesperson to get some free Nebula equipment on, I think it's a 60-day lend for you to set up in your lab and play around with. And before we get to questions here, because we do have some questions I haven't gotten to yet, I just need to point out for you that all of our, or most of our webinars are recorded, and we automatically upload them to our Zyxel YouTube channel. There's lots of different Zyxel channels because we are a global company. So the ones for the webinars and presentations and things we do here in North America, you will find under Zyxel America channel. That is the name of our channel on YouTube. And generally for webinars, they generally show up the next business day on that YouTube channel. And then you can always find us on LinkedIn at Zyxel US channel. So now let's get to some of these questions here, and give me a second. Let me grab my glasses. I apparently didn't bring them over with me. Let's see here. So from Arnell, can we add different user access to Nebula and permissions? Yeah, so the Nebula it's a granular setup. So the first thing you do when you create an admin account is you will choose which organizations that account has access to. Then you can select which sites under those organizations so you can control if you only have access to that. And then you have the ability to set up the account for full access to those sites, read only to those sites. And then we have a couple like specific roles, such like I said, there's an installer role where they only have the ability to add devices onto new networks. And there's also like a role in there that you can use if you're doing those Wi-Fi vouchers. There's a Wi-Fi voucher rule. So you can allow somebody working that customer desk to be able to log in and generate new usernames and passwords for guests to get on there. But so hopefully that gives you an idea. So yeah, there is different ways of doing that. So Errol was asking, does Nebula record logs with all the changes and by whom? And does Nebula support changelog notification? So I think we covered that, but just in case you missed it or I wasn't clear. So Nebula logs are stored automatically in the Nebula cloud. You can use syslog to export those logs. The free version of Nebula gets you a 24-hour log. The Plus pack gets you a 7-day log, and the Pro pack gets you a 1-year log. For change notifications, who made the change, what the change was, that's only available in the Pro pack. So you only those organizations that are licensed for Pro pack will have access to that. I don't believe there's any notifications for configuration changes. I think it's only when like devices go offline. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's all it is. I don't think we've got every time a change is made that it pushes it out. Don't think so. You can always email me. My email's up there on the screen, seanr@zyxel.com. If you really need to know, and I can look further into it, but I don't know off the top of my head. Arnell is asking, does Zyxel still offer upgrade from old Zyxel to new Zyxel products? That would be our trade-in program. So yeah, you would want to contact your salesperson to get the details on that. We do still have trade-in programs. I don't know which specific products they're available on or what the specific discounts are. But just in order to be able to take advantage of that, you have to be a partner. So you should have a salesperson, David Chen, Andy, Jacob. Contact them and they can help point you in the right direction. And then the other question here was, can we enable two-factor authentication for Nebula login? And that is a question I do not know the answer to, but let's see if we can pull it up real quick and see. Yeah, I'm not sure, and I don't have easy access to the answer. I'm thinking possibly no, but I don't know. Again, you can email me directly, seanr@zyxel.com, and I can get back to you on the answer to that a little bit later. James has responded that he does use multi-factor authentication for his Nebula login. So thank you, James. So the answer to that, Arnal, is that yes, we can use two-factor authentication there. And that is it for questions. I'll stick around for just a second here in case anyone else has anything more, but I do appreciate you guys joining me today and turning up for today's webinar. Keep an eye on things. We do have a lot more webinars coming. If you're looking for more technical webinars, Marcus does those. Try handles our switch and security gateway webinars. And just in general, we're always looking for feedback on what sort of information you're looking for. So feel free to funnel that through your salesperson. The more people that ask for a type of training, the more likely we'll be able to put something together for you. So let us know the type of information you're looking for or ideas you have that you think other people would benefit from. I've got no other questions, so thanks for joining us, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.